What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Canes Insight Podcast, powered by Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. Got a lot to talk about today. Sorry for the delay. Had some technical difficulties. I got kids running around, jumping, but we're up and running. We got a lot going on. We got major recruiting news always popping. Sorry, Sam. We're recording a podcast, baby. Can't help you. So we got recruiting news to talk about. We got team news to talk about. And, of course, Jay Lucas, the new head coach of Miami basketball. Pete, hop in here and save me here.
D, I know you. I know you very well, and you're ready to explode right now with what you just had to deal with the last 10 minutes.
It's all right. It's all right. We're good. We're good. I'm ready to explode with no Kane spring practice to go to. That's what's bothered me most.
I mean, look, I'm still buzzing. I'm still buzzing from Jay Lucas' press conference earlier, but I'm excited to talk about some of these standouts from the first week of spring practice.
Yeah, a lot to talk about, a lot to recap. Now no pads, so you can't read too much into it, but you do have just some general takeaways and first impressions, which as I've learned doing these things for a long time, first impressions are extremely valuable. If you're looking for a lawyer, you will get a great first impression from Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about has been injured in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. Dial 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life with Anajar and Levine. So, yeah, just to kind of pulling up my notes here. I was talking to sources all weekend about spring practice. Obviously, we were able to be out there. So, just some kind of major takeaways that kept coming up in my discussions with sources. Malachi Tony, right? A lot of buzz on Malachi Tony. I saw him myself, saw what he could do, not just the talent in the slot and as a returner, but also as just a individual, a competitor, somebody with a tremendous head on their shoulders, somebody who's focused on doing everything they can to be a great football player, works extremely hard, no off the field distractions, just kind of an A+ off the field type of guy. And then, of course, he's making plays on the field. Another observation that I was getting just from talking to people is that these young kids on defense are very strong and very disciplined, maybe better than they thought on the defensive side of the ball. Hayden Lowe, we know what he can do. Extremely powerful, the 5-star. But even a guy like Herbert Scroggins is somebody who was singled out to me as someone who not only can get to the quarterback as a natural rusher, but they will play assignment football even as a young player and play with strengths, play complementary team ball. And all that fits in very well with this defensive coordinator. Dante Simpson, a guy mentioned as someone with a lot of talent going forward, a lot of upside. Zeke Marcelin, somebody who maybe didn't have the ideal size and athletic ability, on paper, but who's bulked up and is making a lot of plays. Amari Wallace, similar. These are just some guys that were singled out to me in the first week as maybe surprising some folks. In terms of transfers, we know the secondary, Xavier Lucas, we talked about a bunch, Zechariah Poyser. David Blay was described to me as that he's someone that's very, very good at fighting through contact and still finding his way to the football. You have Moten and Justin Scott, guys with elite first steps. Blay is a very good first step, but he's really good at fighting through contact and making plays. Artavius Jones, the defensive tackle, another guy who has opened some eyes with his athleticism and power. Question here from Nick Isaac saying, any word on Chance Robinson? Didn't see him out there. Is he injured? He's still working through some stuff, but hope to see him out there soon. Big body guy. He's very just impressive on the hoof with the size he has at the wide receiver position. So he's someone that definitely watching out for. But right now, the kind of the guys trending are those wide receivers, the young ones, Malachi Tony, Josh Moore, and Dalen Upshaw.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. A lot of the stuff that I've mentioned in my instant reactions from the car right after the media viewing portion seemed like stuff that you've seen and heard yourself as well. So it's good that that's matching up with Malachi Tony. It just, again, when we see him, there are some 1-on-1s and some 7-on-7 stuff that I get to see, but there's even in the positional stuff that he's very efficient the way he moves, right? And we know about the natural playmaking ability, natural playmaker in terms of, he played quarterback and has played all over. But to me, someone who, from an athletic standpoint, is going to be ready to go right off the bat.
No question about it. And look, I got to emphasize, there's no pads, right? What you're seeing is just basically flag football. There's a little bit of contact, but it's not, full on tackling to the ground, anything like that. So we're getting a question here from Scuba Steve about Darius Hayes, who's a linebacker we went through this last year with Hayes in spring. He really started flashing once the pads came on fully, and he was able to, really knock guys around. So guys like that maybe are not going to necessarily show everything they can do. Malik Bryant's out there. He's wearing number 9. He looks fast, looks sleek. He looks like he's gained some weight. Not quite Tyler Barron in that number 9, but someone that's added some pounds and is going to be a factor up front.
Yeah, I also agreed with what you said about the young guys in terms of defensive linemen, their body types. I told you that I was talking to a guy who's been around Miami within the last 10 years and has seen a lot of different players come through Miami, and said that the young defensive line class looked really good. Mentioned Simpson, Scroggins, and then obviously Hayden Lowe, which I think some of the guys from last year's class, were excited about them, but they better have good springs, because Hayden Lowe is coming to take reps from people. I really believe that.
Yeah, Armando Blunt's somebody that I mentioned too. You mentioned that last class. I think him and Hayden Lowe are kind of two peas in a pod, just the way they play, their power, their explosiveness. You heard both those guys singled out by Ruben Bain, basically saying, these are guys that really play hard and are coming from my spot, along with Justin Scott, just young players that Ruben Bain identified, 5-star players, right? So all three of those guys, Justin Scott, Armando Blunt, and Hayden Lowe, 5-star defensive linemen. Those guys got to play. I mean, you don't bring in 5-star defensive linemen just to develop over years and years. That's not this era of college football. So those are guys to keep an eye on. Quarterbacks, still too early to kind of really tell too much. You'll see more as they mix it up here coming out of spring break, which is right now. Next week, I think you'll see more from the quarterbacks, maybe guys playing with different units. So it's not just, like Luke Nickel threw a lot to the walk-ons, where you're not going to see the full extent of his ability. But, a couple other guys that kind of caught my attention just early on in spring. Jordan Lyles certainly is a bad boy, changed to number 2, and he's making a lot of plays. Again, not full contact or not taking him to the ground, but just the explosiveness that he plays with and the size. It's hard to miss Jordan Lyle. Elijah Lofton, I made this comment on Kane's Insight. I think he's the best player on the team, just from a football player standpoint. Mauanoa is the best. He's going to be the highest pick. He's the most valuable, right? He's the guy. But in terms of just the ability to play multiple spots and be effective, I think Elijah Lofton, who can run, who can catch, who can be a lead blocker and collide with linebackers or defensive ends, who can block in line, who can do all those things, and run routes and catch one-handed. I think he's probably the best all-around player, and he had a really, really good first week.
Question here from Hurricane 2511. D, what kind of polo is that? Love the show, guys. Appreciate the support.
I think it is Peter Millar. Remember, if you want to get your Hurricanes gear,
Millar. Come on, yeah. Man. I can't have you messing up the golf polo pronunciations. But I have something queued up that I'm sure you're about to talk about right now.
Oh yeah, if you want the best hurricane gear, Miami Hurricane Team Store, MiamiHTS.com, the official retail provider of the Miami Hurricanes. Use promo code Insight20, get 20% off your first item at the Miami Hurricane Team Store. That's a nice one right there. And you can get that right across the street from campus next to the Thesis Hotel, and also online, MiamiHTS.com. Use promo code Insight20. You get 20% off your first item there. A lot of you on polls at that Jay Lucas press conference. I know we did an instant reaction, Pete, but just in general, I know you've been digging kind of after that press conference, and you expect us to be, you don't have to say names if you're not able to, but just you expect us to be pretty active here in the portal, as you'd expect with the whole roster to replace.
Yeah, I mean, look, I posted it. And again, a lot of this stuff I'm posting directly on the basketball board. I'm out of retirement, man. I hadn't for the last couple of years, even though I've been back doing the podcast, I hadn't really been doing much posting on the website. But the basketball stuff's brought me back. And Mr. Dean, guy from South Carolina, upstate, who entered the portal, Miami native. I think Miami could be in the mix for him, or they'll have interest in him. You're, as Coach
and that's
Lucas
his name, right?
Today,
That's his name, Mr. Dean.
Mr. Dean, yeah, Mister. So I mean, look, they gotta, as Coach Lucas said potentially replace 13 guys, right? Maybe a player or two, and then bring in a guy or two in the recruiting class as well. But there's going to be a lot of portal. I would think more than one or two players in the signing class. Let me rephrase that. But you're going to have to be very heavy in the portal here. So you've got to fill out with a lot of different body types. And look, I post another thing I posted on the board. Just, I know we're talking football here, but I haven't seen this posted anywhere else, and I think it's pretty significant. It's not really under wraps anymore. But Columbus coach Andrew Moran was at the press conference, right? So he was there in person. I think that's a pretty good sign that he's going to be officially joining the staff, and of course, that's going to lead to the possible speculation here. It's not going to be possible speculation. He was asked, Coach Lucas was, about, potentially if any Duke signees or commits have reached out to him since the news. And he said, I'm not going to comment on guys who are signed or committed elsewhere, but on the same token, we want to keep the best players home. So we went into that in depth. You can go listen to that full instant reaction video there, but there hasn't been enough denial that it's not going to happen 100%, right? I think I've said it a couple of times, better than 0% chance that Miami's able to get the boozers in here. More than 10 or 15, I don't know if it's that right now, but interesting situation to monitor.
Yeah, no, that would be a very interesting situation. Maybe other Duke commits, right? Because I know he had relationships with a few guys.
Shelton Henderson, yeah, a guy out of Texas, out of the Houston area. Cool to see his dad in the building today. And I spoke to someone after the press conference. Last thing I'll say here. Spoke to someone after the press conference who had a chance to interview John Lucas, and basically Lucas said he's so proud of him because he said, I've never made a call on his behalf. So that's kind of what I said in the instant reaction that we did, that yes, it's John Lucas's son, a guy who's very well connected and well thought of in the basketball world, but his rise to this point, Jay Lucas's rise to this point, doesn't seem like a thing where his dad was setting him up in situations. No, John Calipari plucked him from Texas because he had proven to be one of the top recruiters in the country at an early point at Texas. Duke took him from Calipari because they didn't want to recruit against him. And again, first coach hired there in 30 years who didn't play at Duke, right? So those sort of outliers to me are very, very intriguing about this hire, and I think we're both excited about it. So got to build out the staff around him, but could be very interesting, some of the names that are already being floated out there.
Yeah, and I got some questions here going back to football. Cultural Critic says you're skipping over the QBs too quickly. Speak about your early impressions, positives, and critiques. Like I said, it's hard to judge them because they're not working with the same receivers. So I'm not getting a great feel for them at the moment, just because, again, when Luke Nichols throwing to walk-ons who are still kind of learning where to go, you're not going to get the same flavor. And, Emory working more with the ones and the first team offensive line is going to look a little different. So, I mean, Emory looks like how he looks. He's accurate. You don't want to get him off his spot, but he can deliver the ball. Judd Anderson, a lot of tools, still working through his progressions and ability to kind of see the field, but he's getting better there. But good size and good athletic ability and can throw. And then Luke Nickel, quick thinker, accurate, but again, the timing with those young receivers is off because there's just not a situation that's conducive to the passing game right now. So I think when you see, Emory with the twos, Judd with the ones, or Luke with the twos, or Luke with the ones, I think you'll get a better feel for everything. HVAC asking, any word on Lightfoot, McConaughey, Elias Rudolph, and Pickett? These are all the class of 2024 defensive ends. McConaughey's still a little banged up. He'll get out there soon. With Lightfoot, Rudolph, and Pickett, all very similar players. I think Pickett's probably been the most reliable in terms of just what you're going to get from him on top of being a very quick, dynamic rusher. Lightfoot's got a lot of power for being a smaller guy. He's got a lot of talent. And then Rudolph's just kind of a long, natural rusher. So it just depends kind of what down it is, what type of situation it is. They're all pass rush specialists, let's say, but some of them are better against the run than others, and others are more, just dynamic against the pass. I would say Pickett's the most reliable right now. Lightfoot might have the most talent of all those guys. Rudolph, really natural pass rusher with great length. Question from James Kane about Josh Moore. I think all three freshman receivers, Dalen Upshaw, Malachi Toney, Josh Moore, those guys all look good to me. Moore, he's moving well. I think I'd heard some people say he's so big, maybe he's a tight end. He's not a tight end. He's a receiver. He's catching screens. He looks pretty twitched up, obviously big, and he looks the part. I think they're all doing the right things. I see him staying after practice, catching the ball. So, just in general, my observation is that the young wide receivers are doing the right things. Let's see. So, a question for you, Pete, here from Scuba Steve. Do you realistically think the roster is going to be flipped in a good way this year, or will it take a year for Jay?
I mean, will it take a year for them to make the tournament next year? I don't know that they're making the tournament. Like, a lot depends on what happens with the Boozers, quite frankly. They're the ceiling for this team. Like, if they land those guys, it could be a top 10 team next season. Not even exaggerating with what I think they could build around them. The gap between that, not landing them, and then still being able to still put together a nice roster, you could still do that. But I don't know that you're accelerating to the top 10, 15 without those guys. I think there's going to be a lot of people interested in coming to play here for him. People that are maybe he's recruited and didn't end up at Duke. There a lot of times, and this is something I've heard, it happens in the portal now, is coaches when they move schools, maybe they're at a different situation where they recruited a guy in the past. You can kind of say, well, look, the head coach didn't want you, the defensive coordinator, I wanted you, you were my guy at the other place. There may be situations, because Duke is a very unique situation when it comes to recruiting. They recruit at a certain level in basketball, right, where they're almost plucking the guys they want every year, and it's a much smaller base. So I could see there being relationships across the board that maybe for whatever reason it didn't happen at Duke that are going to be interested in coming to play for him potentially at Miami. So yeah, I think you can get a lot of talent here in a short period of time. But we saw the issue last year. We've seen it before here at Miami. It's getting those pieces to all work together, right? So there's going to be an element of, like I mentioned to Mr. Dean earlier, where you kind of have to start recruiting these guys, not really knowing what their role is going to be right now exactly, but knowing that they can play a number of roles along the way and making sure that they'll be willing to do that. So.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we're seeing, from bagging up saying Miami needs major talent before they can be relevant and who's so many holes. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even call it holes. There's no team. So,
you're building it from scratch. But I will say, basketball, you can flip it way quicker than you can in football. Now, with the portal, it's obviously a little bit different in football now, but you have 5 guys on the court in basketball. You got 11 on both sides in football. There's a lot more moving pieces, a lot more depth issues potentially. Not in this with this specific team. And I was talking if you're talking about rebuilding a team, right? So, and again, Miami's had top recruiting classes in basketball the last couple of years. Now, obviously not right now with Abel leaving the class, Ben Ahmed as well, but you have had a foundation where you're recruiting at a high level. So it's not to say that you don't have the resources. And people keep saying, look, they don't have the NIL budget. And I just don't agree with that, because on the basketball side, because people say, well, they're putting all the resources towards football. But again, you don't get a Jaleel Bethia, who was a top 10 recruit. You don't get a Matthew Abel. Obviously, it fell apart now because it was because of this coaching situation, but borderline 5-star, right? You don't get these sort of guys. Austin Swartz, top 50, top 60 recruit without having some sort of budget. And I think you will now elevate now with a Jay Lucas as your coach recruiting. In terms of recruiting wise, continue to elevate. Not to down anything, Coach O recruited some big time guys. So I don't want anyone to take that the wrong way.
Yeah, Mark Pope built it from scratch. Obviously, Kentucky, different brand, but it's possible. There were players at the press conference today. We talked about the instant reaction. You mentioned Kyrie Huey was there. I saw AJ State and McCray and Joe Bett.
Joe Bett, yeah.
So those guys were out there. Didn't see Bethea or Divine. I don't know if
it's
you saw
also
that.
spring break. No, it's also spring break though, and the season's over. So some of these guys may be back home. Some of these other guys maybe just stayed around. I did find it interesting that I think all three of those guys have years of eligibility left.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't have expected a Brandon Johnson to have been there or a Lynn Kidd, for example, right? Or I found that interesting. Again, not to say that Bethea or Divine are like out because they weren't there. They may be back home, but these three guys, were there. So that was interesting.
Coming about Clemson opening the bag, taking kids, Portland otherwise.
They just got another commit as we've been on here, D, a 4-star corner.
Obviously, Grant Wise. Pete and I took a look at their recruiting class for Group Chat Sports, which we do, which kind of tracks the portal moves of other teams and the recruiting moves of other teams. You check that in Group Chat Sports on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Appreciate you doing so. But basically, Clemson is a good recruiting school under Dabo. They have had a tough stretch where they've really dropped off and allowed Miami to dominate ACC recruiting. Last year, they lost 5 top 100 guys or something like that were committed. So they had a tough year. They're bouncing back. They're getting the kind of guys they get. You got guys from, Naeem Burrows from Jacksonville, right? That's kind of an area where they can do damage. Thinking back to CJ Spiller, he was a Jacksonville kid, right? If I recall. But certainly they get guys from Florida, receiver and running back. Grant Wise from the Panhandle. He's really more of a Southern kid, I think, by nature, even though he's a Miami legacy with his dad, Ty Wise, being a player here in the 90s. So I think that's the kind of guy they can get. They're going to make a move for Cannon Pickett here, who Miami wants in the interior line. We'll see if Miami can hold off Clemson. Clemson has the momentum coming off a visit for him. Tampa's another area where he's done a lot of damage. So, we'll see what we can do there.
Yeah, Marcel Gibson was the one who committed today.
Yeah, and they had Naeem Burrows, who's a really dynamic receiver. They had a couple receivers that were track star kind of guys. So they're going to recruit, man. Look, they won the division last year. They won the conference last year in a down year, and they are going to be a preseason top 10 team, even with not using the portal, not signing a lot of high school recruits. So they're just a type of program that's going to cause you problems and stick around. They're not going to be down for too long. So I don't know if it's them opening the bag necessarily as much as they're a pretty good recruiting school and they have some success. So until they fall off, they'll be a threat to land kids. Their kind of kids.
Right. Bagging up says they have 6 or 7 Florida kids now.
Yeah, and look, they've had them over the course of their time, right? You think back to, Sammy Watkins, CJ Spiller. They've had guys, the Mullen, Trevell Mullen. I'm saying Trayvon Mullen, the first Mullen brother at corner. They've had guys from J-Ron Curse. They've had a lot of guys from the state of Florida. You can go back to when they had Cal Parker at quarterback back in the day when they beat Miami. They've always been able to recruit Florida at a pretty high level. What are you smirking about, Pete? I see you.
I'm just reading our lovely basketball boards. A funny question was posed to me here.
Oh yeah, what's that?
Someone asked if Pete and Furman shook hands at the press conference today.
I thought you guys did a fist bump. Did I see that wrong, or a wave of some sort?
It was a good fist bump.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, that was a nice event. Shout out to Megan and the whole staff there in Miami's SID.
It was a nice setup, man. I gotta say, the auditorium was cool. That was my first time in that auditorium setup.
And I thought he came across well. I mean, look, it's a press conference, so we talked about the instant reaction. They're gonna come off well. But you could definitely see that he's comfortable. He talked a lot about how he's prepared for this moment his whole life, kind of picturing it, visualizing it. I mean, he's been brought up to be a head coach. His dad was a head coach, so it's not like something he stumbled into, right? This was by design, and now the culmination is there. So, that's something to kind of keep in mind. This is not just a random person who became a coach. This is someone whose dad was a head coach in the NBA and has been kind of trained for this opportunity. And definitely didn't seem too bad about being in Miami. His wife, his family, they seem pretty happy to be down here. Made a lot of jokes about it. I'm sure as he ventures off into Miami, he will find the #1 Cuban restaurant in Miami, about 5 minutes maybe from campus and where we had that press conference in the Dayland Dining Pavilion, and that is Islas Canarias Express. I'm sure he's going to want that bistec empanizado. One of the 7 different types of croquetas, maybe multiple types of croquetas, 40 years and running as the best Cuban restaurant in Miami, getting close to 50 years, 1977. So we're almost at a 50-year anniversary there, unless my math is off, in Croqueta County in Islas Canarias. So Islas Canarias Express.
Almost. We got a couple more years left.
Miami winning a championship at that point when we're celebrating the 50. Hopefully we'll still be having Islas as a sponsor to celebrate. So it'll be fun times. But there you see the menu. They already know.
Yeah, the menu's as legit as it comes. On Lucas 2D, you could tell like the people at Miami with the resources believe in him, and he believes in those people. You need to have the backing, and he believes that he's going to have that at Miami. And the people who are responsible for putting that up for him in terms of going out and building the staff and going and getting the recruits, they're very high on him. So I think it's very important when that's the case.
Yeah, and look, we might as well say, about Jose Mas was there. Manny Cadra, just major influential boosters. Rudy Fernandez obviously works for the school. So Joe Echeverria was there, the president. So the heavy hitters were there in person for this press conference.
There and behind this hire, right? So they made an imprint on this situation. Listen, Jose Mas was very influential in hiring Coach L, and that was an outside the box hire at the time, right? That was kind of a surprise, and people were saying he's coming down here to retire, and we saw what came of it, right? So I think this could also qualify as an outside the box hire, right, D? Because he hasn't been a head coach, but I think will prove to be a really good hire. So excited.
Appreciate that, Rob. Remember, like and subscribe to this show. If you are listening, again, appreciate you. New King God said that Miami Flow believes Miami is just as good a roster than Oregon this year. Would you agree? I mean, here's what I'll say, just big picture. And again, I've been out there. What I'd say is it's hard to know without knowing where the quarterback is. I think Beck's going to be fine, but I mean, until you see that, it's hard for me to say. I expect us to add a receiver. It's going to be an impactful receiver. I expect us to add an impactful linebacker. So without those pieces, you're not seeing the full team. Last year, didn't have Simeon Barrow at this time. Damian Martinez, 2 of your best players. Sam Brown didn't have a great year, but you didn't have him either. So, kind of hard in my view to say where we are at this point. I think we also added we had a lot in the summer. And now that I think about it, correct? Because you also had a Barron, you had a Tyler, you had a Deani Hill. I think those were all summer guys. Alderman, not that they all contributed equally, but I remember there was a run of commitments in the summer. So you don't know what the team's going to look like until you see it. Oregon, they're pretty good right now. They're going to be tough to beat. I think with Miami, we'll see what those portal pieces land. But I think it's going to be a very talented team. I think offensive line, you're going to see it be high end. And you're seeing a lot of highly recruited players start to play. So if those guys can play to their level, and again, you don't know what the defensive coordinator impact's going to be. It's hard to tell in a practice how much better the defense is going to be from a coordinator standpoint. Obviously, we're all very optimistic. I heard nothing but good things. I know he's very excited about the athletes he has out there, but we just got to see what it looks like. So I think it's all too early, but I think roster wise, we're trending in the right direction. When you get the best class in the ACC every year, you're going to slowly get more talented on defensive line, for example. Skill position, even though we do probably need a veteran receiver. I mean, you're talking about guys like Trader, Malachi Tony, Nikar. These are all high 4-star type talents that were highly recruited. Josh Moore. All these guys are highly recruited players. So, they have talent. They're there for a reason. Tight end, same thing. Running back, certainly the same thing. So I think you're seeing the accumulation of recruiting. It's getting better, but I'm not going to know what this team is until after the summer. You can see certain trends emerging, but without seeing the quarterback, without really knowing how the defense is going to adjust to this new coordinator, and without these key pieces, I think it's hard to say. Baganoff says there's no number one type receiver on the roster this year. We'll see what, look, again, I think we're going to add to that position, but, I'm not going to discount the possibility that JoJo Trader emerges as that. He's shown some really nice flashes. He's super talented. It's a matter of the opportunity. You can't say he is that because he hasn't done it yet, but he has the ability just from the flashes you've seen in practice and in the games, and the trajectory of his improvement as he's gained weight and familiarity with the system. I think he could be that. It's just a little too early to say.
818 Cali Kane said, I heard that Brantley's struggling a little so far in camp. Is that just due to him recovering from his injury still? I think, look, with Brantley, we gotta understand what he is. I don't think that anyone should look for him to be coming in as a lockdown number one corner who's going to take away their best receiver on the other side. But I think Brantley, look, he's not the biggest corner in the world, but he's someone that has really good coverage skills. I think that you match him up with someone in the slot, potentially some of these shiftier receivers, and he's someone that could have some success there. You needed pieces to add to this defensive back room. He's experienced, played in the Big Ten, so you had to add bodies to that room. Is he the star number one corner? I don't know that that's the case, but I think he can have an impact on this defense this year without a doubt.
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into that. I mean, he's not going to look that great in this kind of setting because he's small. So it's much easier to see Xavier Lucas, who's huge and fast, and you look at him once and you say, "Wow, that guy's the real deal," which is exactly kind of my reaction seeing him here in spring. But I think Brantley will be fine. And I think he's going to be good in games as well. He's a gamer. We've seen him at the Big Ten level intercept Dylan Gabriel, CJ Stroud, take picks to the house, tackle. One of the highest rated players on Pro Football Focus, which is not the end all be all, but you'd rather have a good focus grade than a not. And he grades out highly, playing at a high level of competition. You're not gonna look at him on a practice field and say this guy's the man. He's not the biggest guy in the world compared to Lucas, compared to Frederic, who's got length, Emmanuel Carnley, who's 6'3", and then Ethan O'Connor, when he really gets in the flow of things, he has size as well, and he's super talented.
Derek Lawrence says, you see any key players transferring out this summer? Look, I don't think either of us are going to speculate and say any names in particular, but what I watch for in cases like this, obviously you had an Isaiah Horton situation that the guy was probably slated to be your number one this year, right? And then you had Colby Young a couple years ago, where guys that in an ideal world you don't want to lose them, but certain things come up. Outside of a situation like that, I think what you'll probably see after the spring is, just to use defensive end, for example. We're mentioning all these young guys we're excited about, right? Guys who were maybe here last year. And we expect them and we hope that they take that next step. But if certain guys don't emerge or haven't developed, then they might see that writing on the wall. And I think there may be at certain spots some stuff like that, guys who, look, they just, again, see the writing on the wall, or maybe didn't take that next step and they leave. But right now, I don't, off the top of my head, I find it hard pressed to find guys that we expect to be significant contributors out the window. Yeah.
And look, you guys have been through this before. So we've all been through this before. We've been through a few summers. I don't think this is any different as far as type of guys leaving, type of guys coming back. I mean, we've been through this process. Nothing unusual is happening right now where there's some sort of mass exodus or anything like that. But, it's college football, so these things happen, and it happens the other way. I can't tell you how many kids I was told from people that are not just random people for sure were leaving that didn't leave. And by the other side, the kids that for sure were going to come that didn't come, right? Or didn't jump in the portal.
Stay. Yeah.
Right. So you don't really know on the portal. What I would say is I don't think this is going to be much different than last year, the year before. Maybe we take less just because we need less. I would think we focus more on impact when you talk about wide receiver and linebacker, but you need some depth at wide receiver at running back. You need some depth at defensive tackle, but I don't think there's any screaming needs there. I think defensive tackle, you're talking about Moten, Justin Scott, David Blay looking real good on top. Running back, the top two are with Lyle and Fletcher, and Gerard Pringle's getting a lot of reps. And Chris Wheatley Humphreys put on some weight. He doesn't look that bad out there. A question from Chuck Henninger. Does baseball have a chance to make the NCAA tournament? Huge game for the baseball program here on Tuesday against UCF. They got to win that midweek game. UCF's a tough midweek opponent. Miami struggled mightily in the midweek last year. They're heading into a hellacious ACC schedule. Very disappointing series, lost to UConn at home. Good team with UConn, super regional team last year. Almost made it to Omaha, but not a series you wanted to lose this early. So they got to be UCF. Before they head into the ACC. So they got a chance, obviously, but, we'll see.
Scuba Steve says, D-Bunny, I see a lot of schools cancel their spring games. Any reason why Miami hasn't? And does that worry you? I'll say this before you go, D. I don't think Mario's a guy who makes decisions based on what other people are doing. And, I don't think Miami gets very concerned with other programs trying to come. It's always a concern, but, I think Miami's all right, you want to try to come and do it, then come and do it,
Yeah, I don't think they're worried. Also, it's a great recruiting opportunity being on campus, right? So you're getting guys from South Florida, from out of South Florida. We had a ton of kids there last year with their families, so I think that's probably more of a driving reason why you haven't canceled the spring game, is because it's a good way to get recruits on campus, and that's what Mario cares about, more than anything. We've been lucky. It's not like we've had kids leave for reasons, but it's not like people are just poaching us because we're some minor league program.
That's
right?
what I'm saying. Yeah.
So you will lose kids that you don't necessarily want to lose, but that's not always because they got poached. A lot of times just things happen that led to that. So New King God saying, given what you've seen at camp, do you think we should bring in another state to play with Poyser or ride with what we have? Still too early. I like Dylan Day. I think Dylan Day has been a very impressive player. He's got multiple picks, running hard, tackling, not tackling. So they're not going full speed with the tackling, but he's thudding. He's putting his nose in there. You saw him on special teams this season. Was our best special teams player. So he's not afraid to tackle. But I like where he is. Question about whether we do a podcast as the spring game like last year. Very possible. Stay tuned for that. We had Cam Ward and Ruben Bain on last time, so it was a pretty good one. Callie Kane asked, go ahead.
No, I was going to say on the safety thing too. Remember, I would expect someone from the likes of an Xavier Lucas, Damari Brown, Emmanuel Carnley, someone to also become a pretty significant factor at safety from that group as well.
Yep, that's also very much a possibility. Zaquan Patterson, see if he kind of works his way back into the mix here. He's been banged up, but he's someone who could certainly make a difference. The Port Dog saying SMU using us as their farm team. I wouldn't call it a farm team. These are guys that aren't necessarily playing in Miami. They're doing a good job of getting kids that fit them better than they fit us. I think the one real loss to SMU, in my view, was Elijah Roberts. He should never have left. He showed talent early.
I mean, also Brashard Smith. I understand that in the grand scheme of things, the offense was good, but I'm still of the belief that you need to keep an explosive guy like that on the team.
But where's he going to play? I mean, he'd be our kicker corner for sure.
Listen, he's going to be a top 3 to 4 round draft pick and an explosive offensive playmaker. He probably would be the third highest drafted player out of. You're going to have Ward and Arroyo go probably before him, but he would probably be the third before the next Kane. He's going to go third, fourth. I mean, he probably is going to go third round. There's an outside chance to go second round, man. There's a lot of love for him as a weapon in the league, from what I understand. But he ran well.
That seems high for me. I mean, at 190 pounds without very good moves.
I mean, again, I would have kept him. I don't know.
I'll tell you this: our running game last year was significantly better than SMU. Now, look, we didn't win the ACC because our defense had so many issues. But I mean, our running game was significantly better than SMU last year. We were the best running game in the ACC by a mile. So it's hard to take one of those big guys out for a little guy. And then, in the slot, Restrepo was a lot better than him. So I don't, he'd be a great kick returner for us. I think that was a good situation for him and a good situation for SMU. Chris Johnson's the same way. I think Chris Johnson is going to be a really good player and potentially an NFL draft pick once he figures it out. But, who do you not play to play him? He's not better than Jordan Lyle right now. So I think that's part of the problem. But Elijah Roberts, I think, is the one that he could have fit on any team. And Miami Columbus guy was already showing flashes when Mario got here. I didn't understand why we didn't prioritize him, and I think that hurt us.
I think you're downgrading Rashard Smith, man.
Who's he play over this year?
I mean, shoot, I think that you got to get creative and get him on the field. You have all these formations with multiple tight ends and stuff. You can't have him and Restrepo on the field at the same time. I don't want to go down this whole rabbit hole right now, but I just don't know how you can't say that you wouldn't want him on this team with that speed. Anyways,
would I want him? First of all, he'd be our kick returner, so that's one area where he'd help us guaranteed.
But you wouldn't have wanted. I know they're different players, but you wouldn't have wanted him over Sam Brown this year. What, like, different skill sets, but like
player, he's better than he's definitely better than Sam Brown.
Like you couldn't have used his reps. That's the way I'm looking at it. But
he's definitely better than Sam Brown as a player. As a receiver, he just wasn't that good. He made a move that made sense for him in that offense, and I think he'll get drafted just because his kick returning is good, so he has a floor there. Will he be a good running back in the NFL? I mean, we'll see. But we had the best running back game in the ACC, one of the best running games in the country, right? Probably second to Notre Dame, and even Ohio State, which I think was probably a better running game. They had two super talented backs. They weren't even statistically as good as us, so it's hard to get better than where we were. Some questions from Johnny Lagoon. Ran into the Lagoons on Saturday. I think it was Saturday. So I got two questions. How's the Jabari Flowers recruitment? And how's Bobby Washington progressing? Bobby Washington got hurt, so he's rehabbing, which is really annoying. Just annoying is not even the word. Just disappointing for him. Injury. The guy decides to come back and then gets hurt. It's like
next day. It was literally the next day, or like the day of that he had decided.
It's just you feel horrible for him. It's just bad luck, and it sucks. That really was a bummer. Jabari Flowers, that's going to go through the process, and Miami's going to have a great shot. Speaking of returners, I think Jabari Flowers, who's now reclassified to the class of 26, Miami Northwestern nickel corner. If Jabari Flowers goes to Miami, I think he will be the starting returner next year. 2020, this season coming up, and make a significant impact. Although Bryce Fitzgerald's running his butt off. He's playing pretty good, or he's running pretty good, I should say, on the track. And he was an incredible returner on the field. I know that he had some bad track times that gave people some pause because we were all saying how fast he was. But I think he had like a 10.9 or something pretty recently. So he's doing just fine on the track. And he's a super talented football player.
Johnny Lagoon says Grandpa Goon is a fan of the Money family.
Yeah, shout out to Grandpa, soon to be great Grandpa Goon. So Pete, we got anything? What's on your mind? It's a long day of podcasting.
Jay Lucas, man. Jay Lucas. I'm just pumped, man. I'm just tracking all the movement. I'm excited to see him fill this staff out, and yeah, that's pretty much it, man.
Yeah, and the more I think about it, we talked about it, is we're going to have to allocate money in this new era. I would hope he just says, listen, the boozers, that's a different topic. Let's just say we don't go that route. Get somebody, say, you are my star. Pay him like a star and then fill in around him. Don't just try to, we should not have been as bad as we were last year from a talent standpoint. So I just think roster construction, and he made that comment already playing their roles. That to me is going to be paramount, especially in this capped era. Identify who you want to be your star. Identify the person who has the personal characteristics to be that, kind of set a good culture from the top down, pay him premium money, and then add role players around that player. don't just try to get the most stars you can get, because there's not enough money for it, first of all, and you're not going to get the right mix of players. So that's kind of, and there's a new era with the cap. That to me is, I think the Kentucky model is going to be tough to replicate with Calipari, when he just had, all the stars of the NBA as freshmen, and they bought into the system and they moved them along. I don't think financially that's going to be feasible anymore.
Gotta develop, man. You gotta build these guys out, man, because you can only, I think you will get some one and dones. I really do. Guys one and done, 2 years and out. Because I think that's the caliber of player he wants to recruit. And he'll land a guy like that maybe once every 2 years, right? In terms of like a one and done type. I'm not saying it's going to happen every year, but you need to bring in still high level player. I mean, you look at an Austin Swartz, for example, in this last class, he was a top 50, 60 player. Like, that's a good level of recruit. A Ben Ahmed, who was a top 70 player as a big man. Like, that's a good range to be in if you can develop those guys. Those are highly rated players. You can win a lot of games. That's the level of players, along with the transfer guys that Coach L won with here. And I think recruiting will step up a level consistently with Coach Lucas. So as long as these guys are getting developed, there's no reason to think that the program can't continue to take steps forward and be, not saying that it's going to be Final Four, Elite Eight right off the bat, but man, you felt like every year with Coach L, even though you had those horrible years, that you got a chance to go be in the tournament. And you had with him as your coach, you felt like you had a chance in almost every game you played in. These last 2 years were obviously not that, but that's what it felt like at a certain point. So
excited to watch. Stay tuned on Canes Insight. It's going to be nonstop. Sign up for canesconnection.com/CIS. Be part of the solution with NIL. We're going to need all the NIL help we can get. Got some exclusive stuff coming for Canes Connection members who sign up with that canesconnection.com/CIS link. You can do that on the website, or just write out, just like I said, canesconnection.com/CIS. So a lot of fun stuff happening, a lot of news to report coming up soon, and it's going to be an eventful March, especially when spring practices get rolling. But even before then, a lot of big recruits. Number one player in the country will be on campus pretty soon, and a lot more.
All right, Canes fans, appreciate you guys watching. Hit that like, subscribe. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.